Hello, welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to go through 5 do's and don'ts when it comes to self-tapes at home. Now these are just some of the things that I've learned over the years of many self-tapes, and hopefully they help you out a bit at home. So, number 1, always have your camera set up in landscape. So that's what I'm framing right now. If it ends up being portrait, sometimes it can cut off and it doesn't come across great on your laptop or whatever they're watching it on. Unless it's stated in a brief to do otherwise, of course, always do that. But generally for self-tapes, it will always be in a landscape mode, and make sure you just follow for the roll and the specification in the brief. Now a standard kind of size frame is a mid shot. So that's about up to your stomach, and then just above your head, so there's a little bit of gap in case you might move around, and just general leeway for you. The next one is plain backgrounds. So right now I have a grey background behind me, which just to make sure that everything's clean, smooth and looks the same. Over the years I've self-taped in front of many different backgrounds. For example, I've stood in front of curtains, they're completely closed and so there's no movement. And in general, just plain backgrounds, if you have a plain wall, it's just basically so there's nothing distracting behind you and to make sure all the focus is on you and you performing. I've even used a corner of a doorway as well because it was white and plain colours. So if you're struggling with space, I completely get you, but you can make it work. Now, when it comes to any of my self-tapes now, I always make sure that I have more than enough time to record it. Because I find that when I give myself no time at all, I end up stressing about remembering the lines, I'm more likely to muck up, and it also puts pressure on you and if you have a reader as well. So giving yourself loads of times gives you space for errors, mistakes, and even experimenting with the roll. I find that the more relaxed I am, the more I'll find moments of reacting or listening to something that I didn't hear before, and more often than not, they're the takes that I go with. Now this one's quite similar to the background. This is lighting. Now I'll go into more depths in another video what specific lighting I use, but for a standard self-tape, the main thing is just to make sure that it's nice and bright and well lit. Because the aim of the self-tape is, again, so they can see you perform. So if you don't have the best lighting in the world, because don't get me wrong, most houses have the horrible yellow lights. So what I used to always do is try, if you can, record during the day in front of a nice big window. So you can get all the natural light and it can show your features as well. Now if this isn't possible, I've even made it happen with some desk lamps. Yes, that's right, desk lamps. So if it's too overexposed, it sometimes means that your features might come across flat, or you might be blown out and they can't really see your full expressions, or on the other case it'll be too dark and they can't focus on your performance because they're trying to squint and see what you're doing. So the main one for that is just natural lighting. Now when it comes down to your performance in your self-tape, you want to make sure that your eye line is still quite close to the camera lens, because majority of the time you're never going to look into the camera like I am now. You want it looking just slightly off. So as you can see, you can still see both of my eyes very clearly, but I'm not looking directly at the camera. If I start looking over here, you might start losing my other eye. If I start looking too high or even down low, you're not going to see my expressions, the emotions and reactions. Now, a little tip for you. Of course, it's always better to be able to imagine the person there if they're not there for you. But to make it a little bit easier if you are starting off and you're not used to that depth perception of focusing on something that isn't there, maybe put a marker or have a spot so you can look at. You can use blue tack, you can use sticky notes, you can even draw on a piece of paper and draw a face, just as long as you don't laugh at it. Whatever works for you, you do that. Now don't stress about it too much, because to be honest, this is just something that comes with a bit of practice. Throughout my self-tapes, I still do it sometimes of looking too far away or accidentally looking at the camera. Just always try and keep it around the camera edges. That way the audience won't lose connection with your eye lines and will know exactly who you're looking at. So they are my top 5 do's in self-tape. Now if you're still here and you're enjoying this video, please give it a like, subscribe and turn the little bell notification on. Now we're on to the don'ts. Now this follows on about the backdrops. Now it's always key to try and make sure that you don't have a busy background. For example, if you have a TV on, if you have photos in the background, if you even have animals who come into the shot. As much as it's probably cute to watch, it takes away the focus from you to whatever is distracting the audience, meaning that they're not engaging in your performance. You want to make sure that they're only watching you. So as I said, plainest background as you possibly can. I think once I even sat in front of like my cupboard, but it worked. Now don't worry if you don't have the perfect audio setup when you're first doing self-tapes. I used to rely on my phone's audio, and that was a couple iPhones back, so they weren't the best. And I always find that when you're doing self-tapes and you want everything to be quiet, that's when you start notice that the radiator makes a little bit of noise. You can start hearing the walls creak and all of those sort of things. But what I try and do is time it perfectly with noises. For example, if you know you have noisy neighbours, but they're normally out in the evening, maybe film then. Or if you even try and time it before all the kids get back from school or when people get back from work. It's just finding the right time for you and your situation. Why is it always when you're trying to film a self-tape, that's when all these noises start happening? The biggest frustration I find. Now this one's about your clothing. What I've always been recommended is to make sure that you don't dress exactly like the character. Instead, you want a dress that reflects like the character. For example, if you're playing a nurse, you might just want to wear plain white clothing. Or if it's a period or classical role, you might want to wear something more reserved. Maybe like a high turtleneck, your hair up, out the way, and simple makeup. The key thing is so you reflect the role. So it makes it easier for the casting directors and the directors to see you as that role. Now this is a big one. Don't forget to check over your self-tape. Now I know how much you just want to get edited and sent. You need to make sure you check over it because you might have blank spaces in your edit or leaving your other takes at the end of the footage or the outtakes. Because as much as it probably is amusing for them, you don't want them to see that. You want it to come across as the most professional and best take you can do. And you never know what might happen to the video, whether it's the video quality, the sound's all of a sudden gone. It's always best to be safe than sorry. Because once you've sent it, you can't get it back. And last but not least, this is an important one. Don't ignore the instructions for your self-tape. If you skim over the details, you might miss something really important. I know how exciting it could be to just wanting to get stuck into the self-tape and get it done. So what I always do with everything I do, I reread it as many times as I can until I've got every single information down. And just try and follow it down to a T. For example, they might ask for your slate, they might ask for it at the beginning, they might ask for it at the end, they might want 2 takes in one self-tape, they might want them separate. So when you double check over all the details and when you do send it off, you come across again the most professional and organized version of yourself. Now there are so many more pointers I can go through, but these are just some of the key tips that have helped me improve my self-tapes. If you thought of any key do's and don'ts that I've missed, then please just let me know down in the comment sections. And plus, help each other out. Now I hope you've enjoyed this video, and don't worry, I've got many more self-tape tips to come. Please let me down